Hello, Justin here. I just wanted to let you know that we had a small issue with the audio recording this week in that I lost the original files. The podcast is still great. You just might notice at a few points it's a little tinny or echoey. But otherwise, it's a great episode, so enjoy. Hello, I'm Justin Whitty, the curator of the CleveCast Museum of Art, and this is the CleveCast, a weekly podcast going behind the scenes at the CleveCast Museum of Art. And because this summer we have the exhibition Hokusai and Ukiyo-e, The Floating World, up through September, each week we'll be talking about a different aspect of that exhibition. And today we are very lucky that we will be joined by the Assistant Curator of the CCMA, Julia Walker. And Julia and I are going to talk about the planning, development, construction, chaos that was the design and curation and creation of the exhibit that's in the atrium of the McAninch Arts Center that provides historical context to both ukiyo-e, the Edo period, artists like Hiroshige and Hokusai, as well as talking about the influence of all of the wonderful work that's on display in the museum galleries. So here we go. So welcome, Julia Walker, the Assistant Curator of the CleveCast Museum of Art. Hi, Julia. How are you?
Hello. Good. How are you?
So, Julia, today I just want to talk about and kind of reflect on the work we did in the historical exhibition, or talking about the history of ukiyo-e and Edo that's in the atrium of the Art Center. And to start, I just wanted to share a few images. Do you remember this picture?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's the early lobby sketch on the whiteboard. Justin loves a whiteboard sketch.
That's right. The big secret. I'm a big whiteboard guy. So we're looking at an image from last September. And essentially, when we do one of these large shows, Julie and I, we've done two together now, Warhol and now this ukiyo-e exhibition. One of the things we're tasked with is creating from scratch, like a 3,000 square foot or 2,500 square foot, I don't know how big it is, exhibition that provides the complete context for whatever art we're showing. So that means the cultural context, the artistic context, personal narratives, and that's kind of the ground floor we're entering on. And it's like, go. it's a lot. It's a lot to pull together. And I don't know, when we start, I'm very visual. So standing in front of a whiteboard, Julie and I will meet in a conference room, staying in front of a whiteboard and just starting to visualize what the space might look like is a great starting point for me, because I start to think about how might people go through this exhibit. How do you start thinking about it when we start on these projects?
I start with going to the library and bothering the librarians by taking every single book on the subject so no one else can do any research. Just trying to digest as much of it as I can so that when we get to this meeting, because you're really good at the visual part of it, and that's not like laying it out is not something I'm as experienced in. And so for me, I'm thinking, well, where is what information going to go and what is valuable information?
Mm.
How do you write a book on a wall that people will want to read as they walk by it?
Yeah, and I think that leads. So I think that's why we make such a good team on these. For me, I need a real visual anchor to start to get to the point of fitting in the story, and thinking about how people move through this space. And when I was starting to think about, this lobby space we deal with, it's just a big 3-story atrium, open. It's kind of a tough space, mostly natural light, lots of openings. No walls exist in it. So each time we do it, we have to construct walls and a setup, but there's no gallery lighting. There's very little power outlets. There's not a lot of control. And one thing, we were playing with a lot of different ideas. Some of our early ideas were like we were going to build a whole village in this kind of, or a giant ramp that led you up. Because we're trying to balance the story of Hokusai, the story of, the almost 300 year, just, a quick 300-year recap of Edo.
Like people don't have a lot of working information about already.
Yeah, right.
It's fine.
So what kind of caught my mind is two things. One was first the idea of these curved walls as a way to kind of divide up the space and still keep flow through the lobby. And that was really a starting point for me. And it's interesting to see these whiteboard pictures from last September and how close they actually ended up to the final one. So here's like whiteboard sketch we had on the of the entrance, which looks pretty close.
Yeah, nailed it.
What we ended up with, except for there's a little stick person in this one. I don't think they've shown up to the show yet.
Not yet, but we'll be excited when they do.
So that kind of, the curved walls became an anchor for me to start building around. So there's three large 20-foot wide, 10-foot deep arced walls, about 8 foot high in the space that stagger, that make kind of a flowing through the center of the space. And then the inside of each of those coves has its own little kind of mini gallery in that space. But the other is it's such a tall space. It's over 30 feet tall, 3 stories, and there's this giant wall. And I never feel like we utilize the height enough, because that's kind of the interest of the space. We played with it with the Warhol show. We had the silver clouds on the second level, but it didn't really connect. It was more of like something else going on up there. So this is funny because I was looking through my photos for today. A week before I started planning what to do in that second level, I have this photo from the Art Institute of one of my favorite pieces, and that's the fantastic cloud painting by oh my God, George O'Keeffe. And it's kind of above the mezzanine, across from the Impressionist area in the Art Institute. It's right below some skylights. It's these beautiful clouds. And then I was also thinking about this print you were referencing a lot at the moment, and that is by Hokusai, the print Red Fuji, that has these beautiful kind of slight clouds in the background, very iconic Hokusai style clouds, kind of slivers through the sky. And I was thinking, well, it would be great maybe if we also thought of the space as a print itself. And when people looked up, they kind of saw these clouds, a variation of the clouds from his print on the walls. So that's kind of the direction we went. I knew we would have these curved walls. I knew that somehow the whole thing would be reference of a print, and that we would have these Hokusai clouds around the outside. But then it goes to, you're starting to think about what is the meat of the story. I'm thinking about how we experience the story, and then we have to come together and be like, well, okay, how is this going to fit in this space once we have a general idea? And that's where the show really starts to come, that exhibition really starts to come together. And what are we looking at right now?
That is our big working document for the whole text for the lobby. And it also you get the images in there eventually. That's the lobby on paper.
So we start what looks simple. We draw out the layout and say, this wall is going to have this, right? You'll come in, there'll be some information. The back 3 walls will be timeline of Hokusai. Here's going to be in the inside of this cove. Here's what's going to be in the outside. And then this is where Julia's researching superpowers library log really comes in. You gathered an insane amount of information about all those areas, right?
Yeah. I can just start with like more is more, and then you whittle it down.
Yeah. So you have all this information, most of which did not make in the exhibition. and we talk about how the story is going to be told and how people are going to experience it. So then you feel like, we're basically there, right? We have the shape, we have all this information. But then as we start to fit it in the walls, I get to have the cruel job of taking all your wonderfully crafted research and hacking it to bits.
Justin kills my darling.
Information. Essentially, because it's just too much. You have to also think about how much can one person read, right, when they go through the space. So taking all this, so it's this big funnel. There's so much information, and then it's like, well, how do we still get the story across and key points without it being overwhelming? And that's where we started working in that shared doc, but also this is where I started to create 2-scale Illustrator files for each wall in the space to get a sense of how the images would fit, how the text would fit, how the labels, the flow. And then these 2-scale files, here you can see a lot of them for a lot of the walls in the space and otherwise, were then used to create the wallpaper that actually made up the walls of this exhibit. And I'm curious, when we get to this stage, and I am just willy-nilly destroying all the time you put in research and writing, and adding some things, sneaking other things in there. How do you feel about that process?
Well, this time I feel like maybe it's because it was my second time working on an exhibit, but I feel like less got cut than Warhol. Like I feel like I was able to control my working.
The beginning of the funnel wasn't as wide, so
not this time. So I felt like, oh, I've made progress in my own self-censorship. But like, it's fun. It's fun to look at the renderings and be like, oh, the currency section made it in. That's exciting because I spent 3 days trying to understand Japanese currency and it wasn't a waste. That's great. So it's fun. And it's fun to see it all come together because, we talk it through, but there's always that little surprise, or it's fun when I get an email that's like, I need General Perry's black ship. And I'm like, okay, I can find a picture of that. All right. Well, I see how that got dropped in. It's fun.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize that when they go into that part of the Hokusai exhibition, you can see how we create from the ground up, but it's not just, we did the research, we did the design, and also all of the graphics you see, we created. You know what I mean? So you can see them here, and here's another picture. This is just outside your office. It's not like this now. So as we started to produce these, we would send them actually to the College of DuPage print shop to print all the panels of the wallpaper that would go up. And we were trying to get ahead of it, so slowly your office hallway was filling up with an ominous amount of rolled up wallpaper that if you moved just right, it would all collapse.
And you're trapped in this avalanche of vinyl.
Yeah. So then we had all that, and then of course we wanted to make sure it worked. And I was looking back at we ended up making a scale model then of the lobby, because you get to that point, and I started to get nervous. Like, okay, we have the plan, we have the text, we have the story. We're starting to get the actual print files. I want to make sure that this looks okay. So we like to do this. We did this with Warhol. We go old school and make a scale model. So there was about a 6 foot wide model. I think it's still. Do you still have it outside there?
I do.
Yeah, it's still in the hallway, and that's what we're looking at in this image here is the scale model of the space. And I'm actually surprised how close it ended up to that model.
It's really impressive.
Like when I first glanced at this image, I'm like, wait, is that an installation shot or is that a model?
It even has carpet. It's the same carpet.
The actual carpet. The nap is a little bigger because
it's a little bit of a high pile here, but
just some foam core and some Xerox paper, you get a good sense. I think scale models, I had also been rendering all this in SketchUp to get the dimensions right, but nothing beats a scale model. You really get a sense of how it's going to work texturally, space-wise. You can see it from all different angles.
Yeah, you can, duck down and kind of get that sight line that a visitor is going to get, and you can't get that in Illustrator.
Absolutely.
Mini Museum is one of my favorite parts in the whole thing.
Yeah, this is called Mini Museum. Mini Museum in the Art Cave. Welcome to for discounted tickets, you can come to the Mini Museum.
You can't read any of the text, but it's still cool.
We'll set up in a tent outside the exhibit. And then through this process, also for me, sketching plays such a big role, because I often find, even when it came to the layout of the space, I'll be sitting at home on a Sunday, and all of a sudden something hits and kind of makes sense. So we also had to design kind of the interior of all of these coves. And I knew we wanted these curves. We had the outside, we had the information well, but how to deal with that kind of interior convex or concave space was a little tricky. Mm-hmm. And we kept moving forward, and I was like, I know there's a solution, so I'm not going to worry. We're going to build this, go forward. And then it was just really like one weekend, all of a sudden the ideas of how to break up that information. And it came through kind of the creation of Japanese style kind of wood screens that could sit and be used in different ways in the spaces. And I thought, I thought they worked out well, but it's fun to see these early sketches of that, because these were like the very first sketches, and some of them are very close to what ended up happening. And just think oh, we'll take 3 giant 70-inch screens and split up an animated version of the Black Forest paint. No problem. So that's what
when you said that one, I was like, yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, we'll do that. There's no problem. We'll hang it on just tiny little pieces of wood. And we're like, okay, good. I think you have to lock yourself into ambitious things sometimes, and then you figure it out. So that was, from starting to research to the initial plans. By the time we get to the point of construction, which began in March, I think I put up the cloud wallpaper over spring break in March. Just one day went in, put it up, and then towards the end of the March, the walls started to be built by our theater crew. So headed by Rick Arnold and Sabrina Zedler. They and their students came in and kind of busted out the curved walls, which is a funny story, because initially they're like, I don't think we can do these. And I was like, I think we can. We should do this. In my head, we're not getting rid of these curved walls.
They're like, I think we maybe should do them with a contractor. And you're like, no, we can do it. And they did it.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah, anyway. But then we're talking about, over a year getting to this point, and we still have to install the whole thing.
But you convince yourself that well, we've done so much there, it's gonna be easy.
Yeah, you get to that point, you're like, oh yeah, the hard part's done. But we had amassed, probably, I want to say, if it's 8 times 7 is thousands of linear feet of wallpaper. Essentially, it's wallpaper. It's large-scale digital prints on adhesive paper. It's called wall cling. A large part of the exhibits in the atrium's that way, because we can't really show work in that space because it's an open public space. It's exposed to a lot of light. So this is a way we can still tell a story, but it's kind of secure in that way. We had to put it all up. And one of the mistakes we've made as a department on the campus of the College of DuPage is that somehow we've become one of the only people on the whole campus who know how to install this stuff.
Never become the expert on something.
It's Madeline Prisbiz, who is our preparator, and I just spent weeks hanging this stuff, fitting it in. And sometimes it would go on perfect, sometimes bubbles would form. It's just this long
And like you
process.
have to match up because it's separate panels. So like that map, you have to match up the panels so the map is still straight.
And I tried my best to avoid overlapping on text, but it still happens. And then at the same time, we're building those screens in the coves. I'm here. I'm showing a picture on the left of the 3 TV screens we're joking about, because that was another one. Like, we'll make this thin wood screen, and we'll just hang 300 pounds of TV aside, and it'll work out. Luckily, our other preparator who comes in for these larger shows, Jim Lambricks, helped me figure out how we could support that weight, and he helped build those screens. We got those done. But you can also see there's an image on the right of kind of near the end of installation where it was coming together. It just, at this point, to me, did you feel like it was ever going to end? Like we were going to finish that part? Or
it felt like for 3 or 4 weeks, it felt like the lobby is basically done, but then there's more to do. But the lobby's basically done. But it's basically done.
I think that is a coping mechanism we had. It's like, yeah, it's essentially done. There's only about 80 to 200 hours left of labor. And we honestly were working on it up until the day before the public opening. There were things like, because like on the inside of the coves, it's not that full vinyl. We had cut vinyl produced, and then like when you put that up, sometimes letters or periods or commas are missing. And then we went through all the text. We noticed a few changes, but the wallpaper's up. So then I had to like find paint that I could mix that would match. And like, I don't know if you noticed that, but I made those things magically disappear. Or a period's missing, so I found a little paint that matches that color perfectly, and you go through and do all that. And then the funniest thing, I won't be specific on it, but we get it all done, in one of the most important pieces, we find there was a pretty glaring spelling error. Figure out how to remove a section and put it back.
But you can't even tell now. Looks great.
It looks great. And then here's another installation. Here is Ria Van Dyke and Lee, who comes in and helps with these exhibits. While she used to work at the museum, now she helps us freelance. She also created the video, animated video, on those 3 screens of the Black Ship. But then also little things come up. So at the end of that space, it's kind of recessed on the second level. So if you're entering it and you look back, you can kind of see this weird pocket mezzanine on the back where we have some pieces from past shows, and it didn't make sense so much. And one day you were like, what did you say to me? Just like real awkward.
I was like, so this isn't like a big deal or right now thing, but I just wanted to mention that when you are in the space, that area is a little distracting, maybe.
Yeah. And it's just like, as you say it, I could just see the hour clock. It ran up another 10 hours. Because then we put together large scale banners that we could then hang from the top to cover that area. But in the end, we made it. Here, we're looking at some images of it completed, and you have to come check it out. I think it worked out really well. There's a lot of information, but what I like about it is that the movement through the space is very open. There's no kind of bottlenecks of space. And the inside of the coves are kind of, each one's a total surprise, because you get no sense of it until you're in it, which is different than a lot of exhibits we've done. And I think that relates to kind of the work we're talking about too, which is so kind of private and full of surprises and like intimate. All of the
you
work
really have to get close to see what you're looking at. Yeah.
Absolutely. And right now we're looking at the inside of the woodblock print section, which again, Madeline Prisbez worked a lot on. She had laser cut versions of woodblock sections of the Great Wave print created to kind of help illustrate that process. And then we just hung pages, printed pages from Hokusai sketchbooks on the wall, and then we folded them in a way to give it kind of a geometric texture. I like that space quite a bit. And then here's a picture. You can see those banners we put up on the top. No problem.
No.
Just a Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
10-hour day.
Week before the show opens. Hey, what if we covered that space?
But this image is interesting to me because it's so close to that image of the mini museum.
Yeah.
That we looked at. So here's the end. So remind people listening when they come to check out Hokusai and Ukiyo-e, the floating world. This is the first exhibit of this whole experience that they'll encounter. And they encounter it right before they enter the museum galleries, which actually has the original work from the Kiyosone Museum in Genoa of ukiyo-e artists. What are the sections that they encounter in this space?
So one thing about the space that's really great and the flow of it is no matter what path you take, it makes sense. But kind of conceptually, the way we thought of it, the first thing you come to is an intro of Edo, which is present-day Tokyo. So what is that all about? A rundown of the schools of art going on at the time, Hokusai's biography from birth through Great Wave and then after. You get a rundown of the printmaking process, of how Japan went from being isolationist to influencing global artistic trends and what that looks like today. And then you also get some biography on Hiroshige and his influence, and then about Eduardo Kiyosone, who's the one that started the museum that gave us, or that lent us all the art that you'd see when you go into the next, into the museum gallery.
Yeah, and as you mentioned briefly earlier, and you can see examples of some of the engraved currency he designed while living in Japan. Because everyone knows about Kiyosone because we talked about him on last week's podcast. So you know that he moved to Japan to help them update their currency. So, well,
there you go.
There it is. Easy peasy, right? No problem.
No problem.
And it would be one thing if that was the only thing we and everyone were working on, but it's just one aspect.
Yeah.
And of course, in the coming weeks, we're going to delve into different aspects of the exhibition. But seeing as this is the first thing you experience when you come in and it's such an important contextual aspect, it's a good place to start as we start to do these weekly podcasts. So, Julia, anything you want to, last thoughts about the process, this process, or anything, or do you want to quit? I don't know. Now's the time.
No, I want to stay forever. I love it. I really do. No, it's fun for me because, it's making the lobby exhibits is like all of my favorite things that I did in like grad school and stuff. It's the researching, it's the writing, it's thinking about museums, and it's all just packaged into one project. So I love it. And I really love, it's a different format than what other museums do. And I actually like the way it works because you get to learn everything before you see the art. So you're actually spending time with the art instead of trying to read labels and look at what you're looking at. So I like the format a lot.
Yeah, it is something. we bite off a lot, don't we? Well, it is always a pleasure to see you, and of course, a great honor to work with you. So thank you so much for talking to us today. Thank you for all of your work, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again. And to everyone listening, thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe to the CleveCast. You can find it wherever you find podcasts, or you can find it on our website, theccma.org. And that's also where you can find out more about the exhibition, Hokusai and Ukiyo-e, The Floating World. You can get tickets, find about programming, either at theccma.org or at hokusai2025.org. We'll be back next week with a deep dive into some of the artworks on display in the museum. Until then, thank you so much. And goodbye, I guess. Yeah. That whole thing made me tired, so I think I'm just going to lay down.
Okay, bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.